Start. All right, excellent connection.
All right.
All right, we're live again. All right, so today's Wi-Fi vidcast.
We're 7 minutes late.
We're 7 minutes late because we've been coming up with some good topics here. We're going to talk about PoE, just PoE today, because there's so many things to talk about, and more specifically, let's first start everyone.
So why are we talking about PoE today?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that first, or
let's talk about that. So outdoor APs, there's all different types out there, right? So sometimes they use a standard PoE, the 48 volt, 802.3 ATAF type PoE, right? Or proprietary, as you can say. I can't say the word proprietary PoE, which is a lower voltage. So as we know, DC voltage drops over distance. So the standard, which is 48 to I think 52 volts, something like that, that's good for 300 feet, right? So if you have a standard PoE device, 300 feet, 100, over 320 feet, 100 meters, you're good because that voltage is going to drop a certain amount in that distance, and that's allowable for the powered device.
Yep. Yeah, that's the standard.
That's the standard, right? 328. Yeah, that's it. So I always like to say 300 so they don't try to go over. There's a
really good reason why you say that.
I always go a little bit less. I try to say a little bit less. So, all right. So, but with all these lower cost outdoor devices, I'm not going to say who manufactured these, but some Wi-Fi vendors try to save a little money, and they'll make an injector that only has 12 volts, to that device.
12 volt, 24 volt.
12 volt or 24 volt.
Even 48 volt.
It's 48 volt proprietary standard. Yeah, those are all things that are out there. There's even some passive PoE where, the power gets injected into the wire and then it's split. There's a passive splitter near the device, and then it basically just plugs into the DC input. We've seen those in the past too, not so much on the outdoor.
Well, the issue that I was talking about, it was passive. Yeah, so the reason this all really came up for today's kind of topic is I troubleshot an issue that was probably 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that was the last thing we looked at and checked. But all things led to that finally. But do you want me to talk about that, or?
Yeah, first let me just talk about the passive versus active. So,
yes,
a passive PoE device, it doesn't have any smarts built into it. It's basically just sending the power over the wires and the Ethernet, and it splits it out at the end and then puts it into the device, whether it wants it or not. Now, an active device does some sort of negotiation. The powered device with the switch or injector or midspan does some sort of negotiation with, I think they come up and they measure resistance and things like that, and then the switch will send power to the device depending on what it's asking for. That's active.
Wait, what was that?
So with an active device, it goes through a negotiation with the switch or midspan, and I think what it does is when the device comes up, it measures resistance, and then it decides how much power to send it. So it's like a two-way negotiation between the powered device and the switch. With the passive device, it just sends the power and doesn't know if it's getting there or where it's going.
Right. Yeah, so there's definitely different versions. There's many versions out there, I guess. It just really depends, but pardon me. All right, now I'm ready. So I had a customer that was doing outdoor Wi-Fi on the Cloud Series product line, the ECW 160 access point, which isn't Wi-Fi 5 or 802.11ac Wave 2 access point, and power consumption of that device doesn't exceed AF power, so it doesn't go beyond the peak power consumption. It doesn't go beyond 15.4 watts, right? Yeah. So this particular person was using another vendor's PoE injector, but it's it's interesting, but it's also troubling and frustrating when you don't use the right PoE injector, or you have the wrong power source, or you're using the wrong type of switch to power up a particular device. Like if you're using a PoE switch that is AF compliant, meaning it can supply up to 15.4 watts, but the access point or the device at the end needs 802.3 AT power, which is like up to 30 watts.
Right.
You get some really weird kind of things happening. So, you know, the issue might be, there's packet loss, or my customers can't connect. You know, the issue that's being reported to you it could be very misleading, and it could be as simple as they use the wrong power supply, or the power source. They use the wrong one to power this device up.
Right.
So the issues that you hear about from your customers' standpoint could be very misleading, and it could take you into like a rabbit hole of all types of troubleshooting. You know, if you don't check your physical connections first, right? So, you know, I feel like I learned that once, and I'm like, I won't do that again. But then, you know, months later, you forget quickly about it.
Yeah, so if that device is expecting, let's say it's an AT device, the 32 up to 32 watts, and you provide it with AF power, which is the lower standard, it's going to come up. It's going to boot up in most cases,
Yep.
and it's going to start working now. It's going to be working at a diminished capacity. And it may work most of the time, but then you may get a lot of users on there, and all of a sudden the power requirements go up. And then it can't support those users. Maybe it reboots or something weird like that. It may run hotter because we've seen this with like longer distances too. If you try to extend the distance too far, the device runs hotter because it's trying to compensate for that lower voltage.
Yep.
So there's all kinds of things that can happen. So you want to stay within those standards, because it's not something you want to have to troubleshoot. You just want to install this once and have it work right. So, you know, pay for the right injector. Like, you know, these are mostly, we see gigabit injectors now. I know there's some faster ones coming out. But, you know, multi-gig PoE, which, and before, you know, there were some 100 meg injectors. So you got to make sure that, you know, you don't have one of these really old ones.
That's a good point too.
You know, laying around that you're just going to try to use.
Yeah, because we actually manufactured 100 megabit PoE injectors, and then we started putting out gigabit PoE injectors. Right. And yeah, we are definitely trying to we always make sure that the customer is receiving the right injector. Like, if you're using this particular, if it's not 11N or something like that, you want to use this other injector to make sure you're getting that speed to go through, and the right cable type too. We talked about that before, but yeah. So that is a big thing that a lot of people overlook, is making sure. I shouldn't say a lot. I've ran into it a couple of times, but that could lead you. That could be a very frustrating experience if you have the wrong power source. So in this particular case, he was reporting that he was seeing the SSID and he couldn't connect to it, or he couldn't see the SSID sometimes. So there was all kinds of problems, and you almost go down a route of, am I gonna have to RMA this thing?
Yeah.
There's like these weird problems. There's all these things that are happening, and you're kind of taking the people that we typically talk to are very technical. So there's a lot of trust in what they're doing and what they're testing, and understanding like, okay, they probably did this, they probably did that, but you have to always go back and confirm and check. That process can be very frustrating as well. If you're asking for like a factory reset or a power reset, people in response, technicians in response are like, don't you think I did this already? I don't need to do this again. And but there's a rhyme and reason for doing those things. So this particular person was very patient, so we started to kind of dive into, okay, so wait, maybe the cable, something's up with the cable or something like that. And then we started talking about the PoE injector, and I think I was under the assumption that was a bad move, but he was on a PoE switch. a standard PoE switch, but he was on a proprietary. He was on a passive PoE injector.
Not so it's non. So there's 48-volt injectors out there that are not AF compliant. They're just like a little bit cheaper. They're
version.
Yeah, so they basically pass the power through, but maybe they don't check. They don't check the.
They don't have a PoE compliant chip on that particular device,
right.
So it doesn't regulate. It doesn't regulate whatsoever.
You're right. It just sends the power.
Yeah.
It still won't hurt anything because of the pairs that it's sending on. Like, it's unused by any non-PoE devices, right? So it's not going to hurt anything, but it's not going to give you the best. It's not going to give you the best experience with a device that's AF compliant.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And so, like the point that you brought up, it's going to power the device up, and it's going to look okay. Everything's working, and you might even be able to connect to it, and you check it off, and you're like, okay, I can leave the job now.
Yeah.
Now, the job could be 50 miles away.
Yeah.
And then the customer reports an issue, and now you're in a worse situation. So,
let's hit on the reset real quick too, because especially for the outdoor ones, right? So Ingenious has a few different injectors.
And so while you're kind of looking, I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off. What I wanted to say though is we also have proprietary PoE injecters, right?
Yes.
Our proprietary PoE injectors, we test them with our product, and they work with our product,
right?
The way they're supposed to, but it might not work with another vendor. So
right.
You have to be really careful. But our AF compliant, or AT compliant, or BT compliant PoE injectors and PoE switches will work with other manufacturers, no problem. It's only when you're using like a passive PoE injector or a passive or proprietary PoE injector, that's where when it gets questionable, when you're working with like other vendors.
Yeah, so like the EPA 5006 GAT, that one's AF AT PoE injector 30 watts. So that one, I sell that one with Ruckus equipment all the time. Works great. It'll work with other vendors, no problem, right? But then there's another version. It's the which one is it, Brian?
There's the 5006.
I have it.
GP.
GP.
And the GP, by the way, the GP is gigabit proprietary.
Yes. And that one shipped with maybe some of the outdoor APs, right? Or some of the older outdoor APs had that one in there. Yeah,
there's another version that is not as strong as that one. That one actually supplies over 30 watts.
Yeah, 32.8 watts on that one, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good injector, but you got to be careful. You only want to use that probably with Ingenious devices, whereas with the EPA 5006 GAT, you can use with anybody's devices. And then there's another proprietary injector, the EPA 5006 GR. Now, what does that one do?
That one is that comes with a reset button.
Mm-hmm. So that works with a few of the outdoor.
Right on the actual injector.
So that one works with, I think, the ECW 160, the ECW 260, and a few others. Now, there's a reset button that actually uses a pair of wires in that cable, a Cat 5 cable or better.
Right. Yep.
And the access point sees that and resets the factory default. And I know with the cloud you can do that through the app also if you don't have that injector.
Yeah, you can do it through the app. Obviously, you got to be local, and that goes back to our conversation last week of management SSIDs.
Yeah.
And you can connect to that management SSID and do a factory reset through the app.
Yeah, so you can do it wirelessly in most cases. But yeah, so make sure you have the right injector, especially for outdoor access points, because a lot of times those aren't run back to switches. The indoor APs are usually powered off of switches, right? They'll be run back. Yeah. The outdoor ones are kind of like broken off separately maybe than the indoor, so you may have an injector somewhere running it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's typically what that's what we run into with outdoor. It's always a PoE injector.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a hardened switch out there, but it's not, I wouldn't say rare, but it's not used a lot. But I think more and more people are starting to use hardened switches, or they're putting switches within like ANIMA enclosures and things like that, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But PoE injectors are that's what a majority of this stuff is being used for.
And
But
then
there's
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there's three standards that we use compliant, compliant PoE, which is 802.3AF, .3AT, and .BT.
Yeah, so let's talk about those quickly. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page just so I don't make any mistakes here. But so the AF is up to 15.4 watts. The AT is 30 watts. Although we say it's up to 30 watts. I thought
it's 30 watts.
It is 30 watts, and these are
They're compliant.
They're compliant. So then
you have BT.
And then we have BT, which is up to 60 watts. Now, those first two, I just wanted to say about the cabling, Category 3 and Category 5 for AF, Category 5 or better for AT. Yep. And then for BT, Category 5, and it has a 4-pair mode. So there's a mode A, mode B. There's a 4-pair mode and a 2-pair mode. So the BT gets more even more advanced, right? So you can do 60 watts or 100 watts depending on the mode.
Yeah.
And that
you get higher.
And it's also called PoE++, which I think we have on our switches.
Yeah. So there's also, like we just talked about, AF, AT, BT, right? So that's PoE, PoE+, and PoE++.
Right. And what would you run from the PoE++? Like that, this is like a newer standard we're seeing in the last year or two?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're running some sort of extreme security camera, surveillance camera, if you're trying to power up a computer, but you need like 100 watts.
Like a kiosk,
Yeah, or like if you're running lights, that's 100 watts.
Lights,
that's 90 to 100 watts.
Digital signage, things like that.
Digital signage is a big one, yeah. So those are some of the things. So when you're, the device at the other end, if it's a major device like digital signage or like a computer or something like that, then that's where you need BT.
Or some of these like IP cameras that like heavy duty, they have pan, tilt, zoom. They have heaters in there and fans to cool them off. Like they start using a lot of power. Some of the access
heaters
points
and
too.
Stuff like that consumes a lot of power.
And some of the access points, the big outdoor ones, they may have heaters in them, and they may have GPS now too. So because they're using that for channel selection.
That's a major access point.
Yeah. Like, expensive. But yeah, so that's what you use those for. Now, okay, let's talk about one more thing. Well, let's just talk about the EnGenius End stations right now. The End Station 5 AC versus the End Station AC. So the End Station 5 AC, that one's a little bit less expensive, maybe like $50 less expensive than the End Station AC. Why is it less expensive?
Well, that one does come with a proprietary PoE injector.
Right.
That's the biggest reason.
That's why. So that one comes with a 24-volt injector.
It also does not come with a secondary port.
Right. Doesn't have that secondary Ethernet port. Because that secondary port needs power to power it, right? So it's all a cost savings thing. If you want to save that $50, you go with the End Station 5 AC. But if one fails, you may have to replace the whole unit just to get the same injector and whatever, right?
I mean, there's multiple ways of doing that.
You could RMA it probably and go through this, but the quickest, it's going to be faster maybe just to order a single unit if one failed, because you have to get that injector.
You always want to, in those kind of situations, you always want to have extras on hand.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about it, because typically that's a point-to-point, and that point-to-point supporting something pretty major,
Right.
So you want to have extras in case there's an issue or something like that, or, But yeah, the major difference with the AC is that it is compliant. It's AT compliant.
AT compliant. So
it comes with its own PoE injector, which is a compliant PoE. No, it's actually not. It's a proprietary PoE injector that comes with it, I believe.
Oh, it is.
But it will work with. It's AT compliant.
It is AT compliant.
It will work with like a PoE switch, for example, or a compliant PoE injector.
And the that has a secondary port, and it has AF pass through.
Yeah. Yep. It's yeah. So for example, if you're using the in-station AC and you want to power up like a surveillance camera, you could that supports AF. You could do that on that particular device without running extra like cable, power, and a multiple of things, right? So
yeah,
that's the major difference. You're getting the second port. It's AT compliant, so you can run it with a PoE injector, PoE switch if you want to.
Yeah.
Versus the in-station 5 where it's proprietary, less expensive, and in regards to range and speed, they're pretty much the same.
They're the same, although maybe you can the Ethernet distance. You may be able to go a little further between.
100%.
On the in-station AC. Yeah. So you want to stay under that, under 100 meters with the in-station 5 because it's only 24-volt injector.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. So typically with proprietary or passive, you can get about 150 feet.
Yeah.
And you can't go beyond that. So with compliant, you can go 328 feet.
Right.
So that's a major difference. So
yeah,
that's something that we should talk about. Is like that's a major difference in your cable runs. If you have to go that extra, if you have to go above 150 feet, which we do run into that a lot, so you do have to consider that. That's a
yeah.
It's a big benefit.
So if you know that you're gonna have to make a full length Ethernet run, and that you may want to be able to get fast replacements on the injectors or run it off of a switch, then the end-station AC is probably good for you. If you're gonna have a lot of these things out there and you want the lowest price, then end-station 5 AC. You just have to you have to just know these limitations that you may want to have an extra one on hand. You want to keep these a little bit shorter.
Yeah, and the beauty of Keenan Systems is you know all that info. And
I've got it all up here. All right, so I think we talked about everything. Anything else you want to talk about, Brian? Electric car. How's your electric car experience in California?
Typically I wouldn't use an electric car, but I actually love it. Specifically in California.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the commuter lane, and we're in hybrid mode, so we're going back to the office 2 days a week. So it was a huge time saver, especially with like LA traffic, Orange County traffic.
Yeah, you get that commuter pass. Yeah,
you can take the commuter lane, and you're not burning gas, so
it's free. You plug it in at home. It's
Everybody
free.
Clears out of my way when I drive.
The tires will spin a little bit when it has a lot of torque getting off the.
A lot of torque at 30 miles an hour. There's a lot of torque.
Nice, yeah. So the e-Golf's fun to drive, and you get some good deals on those things. The lease deals are super cheap, and
Tiger is on its way to the charging
you get that Volkswagen driving experience, which is just they own Porsche, so I mean.
Yeah, but it doesn't go over 90 miles an hour. So.
Okay, well you don't need to go that fast. But yeah, that's definitely cool. The Volkswagen just came out the ID4, which is I think is going to be huge. It's not my type of car. I'm against the SUV and crossover. I'm never gonna drive one of those if I have the choice. But
you're anti SUV.
Yeah, anti SUV. I want a short sedan, fast sedan that I can drive around, handles good, not like a 5,000-pound SUV that wobbles around corners. But the e-Golf is definitely fun. I would consider it, and the insurance rates are less than Tesla, right? Especially out there.
Oh, major difference between. That's the thing that a lot of people don't consider is the insurance on Tesla is like extreme.
Yeah, because of the aluminum body panel, it's hard to get parts, things like that.
Our insurance company was basically it's due to like limited supply on parts, and they're expensive as well. Now, as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, that's gonna that will change. But that was the thing we experienced. So we were just getting the car for commuting, and that was the only reason, and to use the commuter lane. So there's a big time savings with it.
Yeah. And
in California, I would just lease it. I would not buy it. I would lease it, and
Well, the other thing to talk about though is like if you're getting e-Golf, you're charging 100% at home because that has no DC fast charging, right? Like if you're out somewhere, you're not going to be able to.
We installed a charger system.
Yeah.
I can't remember the Cradle something. I
Yeah,
can't
you got
remember,
the charge point, right? Charge point.
yeah, Charles.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean with the e-golf,
Yeah.
there's like I don't think there's any fast charging because the batteries are air cooled and so basically you're charging that car home. Now if you want to ever road trip a car, that's not the one to take.
No.
The Tesla's definitely going to kill it in road tripping and public fast
my
charging.
My commute's 33 miles one way,
Yeah,
and when I'm coming back, I can charge up to 120 miles, and I burn through that on that commute of 66 miles.
yeah, which is fine. That's basically what everybody needs.
I'm left with 45 miles left, I think.
Yeah.
Is what yeah.
So that's perfect. That's all anybody really needs 98% of the time. Like, but people are like me. Like, I want to take this car across country, so I want to make sure I can fast charge that thing, anywhere.
They're getting better with the distance, but
yeah.
There's that anxiety of finding like a charging station. So
yeah, well, you got to upgrade to the Taycan, then you'll be all set.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Brian. So I think we can end this one now. We can get to work, and we'll
yeah.
Remember to like and subscribe for more help with Wi-Fi and tech products.